The president taking off without taking a look back as the border outrage just keeps building. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. So close, yet so far. The president flying back to the White House this very hour from Austin, Texas, ignoring repeated calls to see firsthand the thousands of kids flooding the border from Central America illegally. All this as the Katrina comparisons keep mounting.
I hope this doesn't become the Katrina moment for President Obama, saying that he doesn't need to come to the border. He should come down.
It's a Katrina moment, right?
This is a different
and you're going to a fundraiser? You're going to a fundraiser and not going to the border where there's this crisis?
I think about the criticism that George W. Bush received when he didn't go to New Orleans at Katrina. This is no different.
Well, the difference with a lot of this outrage is it's bipartisan, as opposed to what happened, well, to this guy, Michael Brown, the former FEMA director during Katrina. Michael, there are lots of differences between these two incidents, but the one commonality is when you get to the scene of the incident. And George Bush was criticized for getting to Katrina too late. This president for not getting to the border at all. Which is worse?
Well, here's why the analogy fits, Neil, and why the president is not going to go to the border. The analogy fits because during Katrina, you had a focal point. You had the New Orleans Superdome, and that focal point allowed the media to really focus on what was going on in that natural disaster. What you don't have in the border issue is the focal point. We don't have this most transparent administration in the history of the world has not let people in. They've let congressmen in under very strict circumstances, under controlled circumstances. The media hasn't been able to get in, so there's no focal point for anybody to focus on. So the American public doesn't get that this humanitarian crisis is as bad as the natural disaster in Katrina. But the president's not going to go because this really fits the Limbaugh Theorem, that he pretends that he uses the words that he's involved, he's paying attention, his staff is briefing him, but he's not going to go because he doesn't want a photo op. So there's a disconnect between what he's actually doing, which what he should be doing is going to the border and showing the detention centers and letting the American people say. Instead, he just comes to Denver, for example, and plays pool and drinks beer with the governor, but yet says he doesn't want a photo op.
I always think that any politician who says he's not into photo ops, automatically they're lying, so I'll just leave that aside.
Right.
But I will say this.
Right.
I mean, during the Katrina incident, of course, President Bush had claimed, and his people had claimed, that he was delayed in getting there because local authorities on the ground didn't want the inconvenience and have to deal with the disruption of having a president and obviously the large company he commands interfering with that. Who knows what the deal was, but we do know when the president did arrive, there was enough anger at the local level. When, ironically, one of the key players in this, no one was on the same page, and the mayor involved in this is now going 10 years in prison here. That's neither here nor there. Well, at what point do leaders then have to say, this is important enough for me to physically be there? What difference would the president's appearance on the border make to you?
It makes a huge difference. And before I tell you what that difference is, let me dispel something, because President Bush was asked directly by me to come to Louisiana because there was a very specific reason. He could not land at Louisiana or at New Orleans International Airport because we had converted that to a hospital.
Right.
But I did call Crawford and I asked him, and I asked the chief of staff, I asked the president directly, I need you to land in Baton Rouge and just walk down the steps, walk to the podium, let the public know that you are engaged, let the cabinet know that you're engaged, and that this is an important deal. That's exactly why the President Obama needs to go to the border. He needs to send the signal to the public that I am engaged. Here's what's going on. Here's the truth. We're going to be transparent. We're going to open it. And here's why that's important. Just like in any company, it's the same in politics. The leader sets the tone, and the worker bees, the deputy secretaries, the undersecretaries, the worker bees all take their signals from the tone that's set at the top.
So that,
and
well,
the tone
wait a minute.
Then if the tone
is
no, we're not involved.
All right. So if the tone really at the top is that We don't think this is a big deal, or as big a deal as those who are criticizing us think it is. And like you said, with the difference of New Orleans, of course, that was easy for the world to see. What's going on the border, not so easy for the world to see. It's not as if mainstream media camera crews are rushing to be there to get every second of it. So he gambled, and maybe successfully thus far, that if you don't see it, it's sort of like the tree falling in the forest. Who the heck heard it? Now I can fly back to the White House and be done with it.
And that is exactly the gamble he's taking, but here's why that gamble will ultimately fail. Congressmen in Oklahoma, congressmen in Texas, the media, folks on your network and others are starting to dribble out little bits and pieces of information. And there will be a tipping point at some place where that information will explode out. We'll see how bad this is. We'll see the hundreds of thousands. We'll see the gang members. We'll see the drug cartels. We'll see all of that. Then the White House is going to find themselves behind the 8 ball trying to catch up. This is why I think it's a horrible political gamble. Plus, he shouldn't be playing with a humanitarian crisis. Just man up, go down and say this is a really bad deal, and we're going to do everything we can to fix it.
You know what I wondered about, too, though, was if you're going to go down there at all, and you're so close, do you add insult to injury by making it a point not to go down there? And it would be one thing if, you know, he was in London at the time, or he was in, I don't know, California. Even there, of course, you arguably make the point to go. But it looks even worse when you're that close, and almost out of spite, you don't go.
So that's why this analogy works about the Katrina moment. So I asked President Bush, stop in Baton Rouge, come down, use the bully pulpit. What did the president do? Against my advice and using the advice of others, he stayed on Air Force One, looked out the window, dipped the wing down and looked at New Orleans, and he was lambasted for it. So that's the risk. And so President Obama
but Michael,
would
what
be
if
much
you're
better.
afraid of bad a scene at the scene? In other words, they're going to be protesters there, the same folks who have been railing against these tens of thousands, and they're going to be screaming curse words at you, everything else. What about the risk of that?
That's part of being president. That's part of being the leader of the United States of America. Get off your butt. There's going to always be criticism. If you're so thin-skinned that you can't accept the criticism, then you shouldn't be president. This is part of his job, for God's sake.
You know, I'm wondering, by not going, there are a lot of people that think that, of course, we've had a whole new vernacular now. We don't call it an illegal immigration problem. It's just an immigration problem. We don't even call them illegals. You know, there are news organizations, Los Angeles Times, I think, the Associated Press, they've stopped using the word illegal in favor of undocumented. That it's now actually politically incorrect to say nothing of just, well, wrong. But leaving that aside, I'm wondering if the president is saying, and the message that he's sending, on top of Nancy Pelosi saying this is an America's issue, North American, Central American, South Americans, as if the border just disappeared, that this is all part of design to sort of say, you know, the Russians, I'm sorry, the Republicans are the ones making a big deal of this, and they're the only ones who are. We think this is an opportunity. We don't think it's a problem. In other words, they're just changing the way we're looking at the same thing.
Neil, you're exactly right. And I don't think it's being cynical to think that way. I think this is how the president was raised, how he was trained and taught to think. This is a crisis, and he is thinking that if Republicans, if you and I keep talking about this, that somehow he will be able to get that bugaboo word that drives me nuts, comprehensive immigration reform, that they think eventually we'll all get so tired of this that the politicians will cave, the borders will be open, we'll just have, think about it, we've gone from illegal aliens, which is the statutory phrase, to undocumented workers that I've heard on numerous places that it went from that to migrants and now to refugees. We're changing the language. We're changing everything about how we approach these truly humanitarian crises that's going on down on the border.
It's also been upgraded to they kind of shouldn't be here to hashtag. This is one network that is using the hashtag freedom fighters. Wow.
Oh,
I don't even know where to go.
I know. It's just surreal. It's absurd.
Michael Brown, thank you very, very much. The former FEMA director. All right, now, Democrats are trying to turn this mess